Hi. Hello. Hello, everybody. Hi. Hi, hi, hi. It's 11 a.m. in the morning uh, on a Sunday, and I am starting my broadcast today. So my name, again, is Artem. For those who don't know me, my name is Artem, and I am a spiritual teacher. So I have a website here, which you can follow. And I host this broadcast every week for my students, for other people who are on the spiritual path, whoever you are, and in whatever part of your spiritual journey you consider yourself to be, you are more than welcome to join, to participate, to ask questions. I welcome everybody to my broadcast, so please join. So this broadcast is being cast on both Facebook and YouTube, and on both Facebook and YouTube, there's a comment with a link to StreamYard, which would allow you to join the broadcast over video or audio. You will need a Chrome browser or Firefox, and I think it also works from mobile. So if you join that, you will appear in my guest room, and I will be able to bring you up, and we could have a conversation where I could address your questions, or if you want to share anything with me, I would be more than happy to have this conversation with you. So the topic of today's broadcast is self-love, and self-compassion. And I will speak on this topic briefly, after which I will accept your questions. And it would be, your questions don't have to be about this specific topic. It can be about anything else. And you can also post questions in comments. So you can post question either on Facebook or on YouTube. I will actually see immediately on the screen your question in the comment section, and I'll be able to address it. So while you are while joining and considering your questions and stuff like that, I will start speaking. So the spiritual journey can be said to be all about self-love. Actually, I mean, self-love is the key. Is your guiding star. It's everything. I think it was Gautama who said, "Love yourself, and everything will follow," and it is very, very true. But it can be very difficult initially to discern between what I would call authentic self-love and egoic self-love, because and actually there might even be no need to discern it, but it requires a specific kind of, if you want to progress in the spiritual path, it requires a specific attitude. It requires a specific, a certain, not specific, but a certain attitude. It requires a certain understanding, because you see, ego is actually in love with itself also. But the egoic self-love is very different. The egoic self-love can be called a self-adoration or self-admiration. It is fundamentally vain. And actually, the previous video that I made was on the topic of vanity, so you might want to check it out. So it is very important to understand what authentic self-love is. You see, and I want to give you an example. Imagine that you are having a conflict with somebody, or imagine that somebody told you something that insulted you, and it hurts, right? So the egoic reaction, the egoic self-love, is first of all superior, and second of all protective. So what happens immediately is kind of the thinking that happens. Well, first of all, there's an emotional response, and it can be painful. And then with that, the thinking goes like, "How dare this person said this to me? He's probably just an ignorant or whatever. Like, oh, he's a bad person or whatever. Or I don't need people like this in my life. So let me remove this person from my life." So there's an immediate knee-jerk reaction to assign responsibility and malice towards other people for your pain. That's what egoic self-love does. Its main point is to protect yourself from further experiencing your pain. And it achieves that by assigning blame, responsibility towards other people and removing yourself or removing them from the interaction so that they don't hurt you again, right? So it is protective and it is fundamentally vain, uh, because in order for it to kind of exist, in order for it to have this reaction, you also have to think on some level that you are better than this other person. Because when you say, like, for example, I don't need such people in my life, or I don't need negative people in my life, you also at the same time saying, well, I'm not like that, I'm positive, I'm great, you see. So authentic self-love is of an entirely different nature. Authentic self-love uh, always focuses on you, and its main focus is your experience, not somebody else's character. Its main focus is how it feels to be you right now. So authentic self-love would feel something like, okay, this hurts. I feel pain. I feel insulted. This is difficult. This hurts, but it's okay. It's my experience. It's the only experience that I have. And you are being compassionate towards yourself for the pain that you are going through. That's authentic self-love. So authentic self-love is accepting of your own experience. It's not. Some people make this mistake when they try to be authentically loving. They try to be accepting of other people. That actually never works this way. You cannot force yourself to be accepting of other people. This is not possible. The acceptance of other people, the degree of which you can be accepting of other people, is entirely proportional to the degree of which you're accepting of yourself. So there's this beautiful saying which says you can only meet somebody as deeply as you have met yourself. So the degree to which you are accepting of your own pain and discomfort, and for example, of your own offenses and grudges and of your own difficult emotional experience, is also the degree to which you can be accepting of other people when they are going through something like this and when they tend to lash out in verbal violence, let's say, or even in physical violence. So, so as you grow in self-love on the spiritual journey, remember to always focus on your own experience and practice accepting whatever you're going through right now without blame and without judgment. And in my experience, the best way to do that is take your attention, take your awareness in the uncomfortable experience itself and away from the mind, because the mind will keep judging, and it's okay. You see, don't judge yourself for judgment. Accept the judgmental mind too, because if you don't accept your judgmental mind, that is also a rejection. That is also not love. You see, so paradoxically, non-judgment starts with the acceptance of judgment. So the mind will give all sorts of excuses and judgments, and the mind actually might even keep this narrative of how bad this other person is. But that is not the focus of practice. The focus of practice, and kind of try to the extent to the extent that you can, to kind of have it in the background. But the focus of practice is accepting your own difficult experience in every situation. So in this way, authentic self-love and self-compassion are actually the same thing. So compassion is the highest form of love. There is no love higher than compassion. So compassion as acceptance of your own experience without judgment is the highest form of love. So I hope that this example kind of helps you differentiate a little bit, helps you discern a little bit when you're being tricked by egoic self-adoration, or when you are truly treating yourself nicely. And treating yourself kindly, treating yourself well, is the path towards deeper and deeper self-love, is the path towards deeper and deeper self-compassion. Notice something. How hypocritical we all are in our experience, because most people would never treat their best friend the way that they treat themselves. Most people would never dare speak to their best friend the way that they speak to themselves in their mind. So when your best friend comes to you and say, "I'm going through this difficult experience, whatever, my husband left me," like whatever's going on with them, right? Or they think that they're total, I'm a total loser. I'm never gonna amount to anything, whatever. If they come to you openly with this sort of sentiment, would you ever pile up on that, right? Or would you say, "No, I love you the way you are. You're wrong. You're just hurting. You're not seeing things clearly," and you would try to support them in their difficulty and also try to offer them a more objective view over themselves. Which is like when people are struggling, almost always they struggle with very skewed view of themselves. So of course you would do that, right? And that's love and that's compassion. So the question is, why don't you do the same thing to yourself, right? That is the muscle to train. That is the true, authentic spiritual growth. And this spiritual growth also coincides in direction with the acceptance of difficult emotional experience, because the more you allow yourself to be in difficulty, the more you see, the more personal insight you have with time, and the greater difficulty, and then the more you allow yourself to approach a greater difficulty, something else which may be even more difficult for you to accept, but you have been hiding from yourself. So interestingly, authentic self-love and self-compassion also lead to honesty with yourself. And since we all carry some amount of dishonesty and delusion and illusion, uh, uh, honesty, brutal honesty, is not possible without being compassionate to yourself. Because if you tend to be very harsh on yourself, then how do you expect to accept your mistakes, for example, and forgive yourself for them? So this is only seems like those are different things, but they actually all point into one direction: love, self-love, compassion to others, self-compassion, honesty, authenticity. They all point into one direction, and that's the direction of spiritual growth, and that is also the direction of personal growth, because there is no difference. So with that, I will stop the monologue part of. I will finish the monologue part of today, and I will welcome my participants, because the dialogue oftentimes is more interesting and more productive, especially for those involved. So we have a couple of guests. Din is here, so let me bring him up. Hi, Din. How's it going?
Hey, not bad. What's going on, Artem?
Oh, I don't. Yeah, did I pronounce your name right?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
So,
Your sound is delayed, but
oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah, that's kind of weird. I don't think you can fix it with the microphone, because the it doesn't seem like it's a microphone issue. It usually isn't when it's just out of sync. So whatever it is, but it don't matter. Why don't you tell what you want to tell, and then I will try to address it.
Thank you. Um, so, I'm curious what your take on. Do you have advice for therapists or other healers that aren't self-realized and they want, and this is their profession, this is what they love to do? Like, how can we best be of service to our clients, even though we still have a long journey to go?
Yes, and and I think that my advice would also be kind of in line with good advice that with some advice that good therapists give themselves. So would you mind muting yourself a little bit because I hear my echo? Yes. As any good therapist will tell you, it's of vital importance to create a safe place for the person. So to to not judge them for their experience, to validate their experience, because oftentimes when people are in pain and they seek therapy, they oftentimes the therapist or the healer is the only person in their life who will not invalidate their experience, and it can be very difficult for them and very relieving to find such a person. So it's very important not to judge them. But every therapist or every healer who still has a way to go will judge them internally, and that is important for you to pay attention to your own experience, to pay attention for your own judgments, and don't hide them from yourself. But the extent to which you can offer a non-judgmental place for them to express themselves is usually proportional to kind of how productive it can be. So nobody heals anybody directly, right? So people heal themselves. They just need to be they just need to be given a safe place to heal. They just need to be given acceptance, right? So it is important try not to project your experience on the person, although it will happen, of course, right? But it's important not to engage with it in it deliberately, right? Uh, I don't feel personally that there's uh, that that there's some kind of psychoanalysis technique that is more kind of productive or important than other. What is important is to just uh, for them to speak about the experience and to accept all of the emotional reaction, right? And to feel safe in doing that. So of course, I would never say that you cannot give advice if something that you practice works for you. You know, so if you have some tricks up your sleeve, if you kind of learn something about yourself and how psyche works, then of course yeah, there's nothing wrong, with giving advice. As a rule, though, uh, it's better to assume that they know what's going on in their life much better than you do, and also they also never give you a complete picture. So because most of the time they always give you a self-serving picture. So it's almost always they picture themselves as right, and they, even if they complain that they feel like a failure, still, I mean, on a deeper level, they picture themselves as right, and other people around them as wrong, and it's important not to challenge them on that before their experience is validated. You see, because the interesting thing about helping people see their distortions, their illusions and blind spots, is that you cannot do that before validating their experience. So if you right off the bat say you're wrong, your experience is not valid, then they close up. So first you need to make sure that they understand that what they're going through is absolutely normal, and this experience is absolutely normal, and it's not wrong, because there's no such thing as a wrong experience. Because for everybody, their experience is the only experience, and then later, when they feel safe in that, then maybe it can be explored. You can explore whether it is objectively true. Or maybe they being too hard on themselves, which is usually the case. Or they being too hard on somebody else, and to see that actually isn't pleasant. So it could be emotional also. It can be so sort of the rapport the mutual trust is very important, because if a person doesn't trust you, he will never let you hurt him. Even if you don't do it deliberately, but just by challenging their view, it can hurt him, right? And for you specifically, for you, it is very important to remember that as you're going through this, he or she is helping you as much as you are helping them. They help you to uncover your own prejudices, your own judgments, your own reactions, and in learning to be more intimate with them, you're also learning to be more intimate with yourself. And because the true love is understanding. That's what love is. So love is fundamentally the absence of judgment, and the absence of judgment is fundamentally understanding, and understanding only comes from experience. If you have come through a lot of hatred, if you understood, accepted, and dissolved your hatred, that allows you to understand other people's hatred, and that allows you not to judge them for it. So it is it's a two-way street, right? And there's even nothing wrong with thanking them for it. It's like, maybe you think, oh no, like it's not my position, like, but that's just pride. But in truth, they are doing you a favor also. So I hope it answers your question.
That was great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so then we have Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hey. Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. You're definitely right that the narrative, I always want the narrative to be in my favor.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yes, so that's a very fundamental quality of the ego. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's very
It's really hard sometimes to get out of that habit, but
Yes.
I'm surrounding myself with people who are fortunately willing to willing to kick me out of that a little bit more. And it was helpful when you said to take the moments that hurt and realize it's not that it's personal, but that I can then deal with it personally. Is that, that's kind of.
Yes. So it's not that, like, yes. So every time that you're in pain, like when you say it's not that it's personal, well, of course it's personal to some extent, but meaning it's not that it's personal. It means that usually, most of the time, actually, not always, but oftentimes, it's not even personal from the perspective of that this person didn't actually mean to hurt you, or at least he didn't mean to hurt you as much. You see?
Right.
You see? Like, I remember a long time ago, I was I was dating a woman who was not from San Francisco, and she told me something like, kind of, the bar scene in San Francisco is shit. And actually, it is. I mean, the bar and club scene in the United States is shit, generally. Like, compared to, let's say, Europe. I mean, just even objectively, kind of.
Okay. I've never been. I'll take your word.
But I took it so personally that my response was, okay, well, what else about me is shit? You see, we take things personally because that's the nature of the ego. Right? So did she want to hurt me this much? Of course not. It probably didn't even occur to her.
What now? What?
Just an example.
I think your advice would be the same if someone does actually want to hurt you that much.
Yes. Then my advice would be absolutely the same, because you see, because then as you go through it, then you also, as you go through your own pain, then ultimately you realize that even if they do want to hurt you,
it's mine.
They're doing that. Well, yes, of course, the pain is still yours. They didn't make you feel it. How can they make you feel through just some airwaves? It's yours. It is yours. It's your experience. But as you go through your own pain and you dissolve your own pain, you also start to see that every time when they deliberately want to hurt you is because they also carry a lot of pain. and it is difficult for them as well. Even if on the level of consciousness they are happy, and deep inside they're still crying for love. And you, because you remember that you were the same. Because also in the process of spiritual awakening, in the spiritual process, you also realize and see all the ways in which you were deliberately hurting people.
Yeah, I remember
And
doing
you
that.
realize why.
And still
Yes, yeah,
even
exactly. And
still.
still you do it, right? So first you see it, and then it becomes distasteful, and then slowly you stop doing it. But you remember, right? So you cannot, if you really have gone through this process, you cannot not be compassionate and understanding of people who are
Right.
trying to hurt you. Which is not to say that sometimes you can be very strict with them back, but there's still the understanding, and there's still no hatred.
No
So
hatred,
it's
right.
very, very important to work through your own experience and to keep the focus on yourself.
And to know that if there's pain, it's only because it always comes back to me. It's
Yes,
always me.
yes,
Um
yes. Which is not
okay.
to say that it's your fault. That's not the
No,
same thing, right? So,
but
yes,
my responsibility.
yes. But your
Um
responsibility, yes, because
okay.
it's your responsibility not to let your pain uh, jeopardize your life. Because usually
Yeah.
when we lash out to other people in pain, when we're being aggressive to other people in pain, that doesn't serve anybody. That doesn't serve us.
Or
It doesn't serve them.
or if we run from the pain that we're feeling and like run
Yes,
to drugs, which
same
I've done
same
lots
thing.
before. So it's
Exactly,
no longer
same thing. Yes,
the
drugs are also
answer.
a means of escape from pain. Yes,
Um thank you for this very much. Like I really, really, really appreciate it.
you're welcome. You're welcome.
We'll catch you soon.
Okay, so to anybody who wants to join, just like Sarah and Dean did, I would be happy to speak to you. And now let me go through the comments. Benjamin says hi Ben. Quasi, I don't know if I pronounced it right. I'm sorry. So Quasi says, "Hello, it's my first time catching you live." Well, wonderful. Welcome, my friend. He says, "What do you do when you feel you have reached the epitome of life and you are left with question of what next?" When you truly reach the epitome of life, the question of what next does not arise. After you have reached the epitome of life and you have answered, removed, dissolved, eliminated all your questions, the only thing that is left is life. So the question of what next amounts to the question, how do I live my life? And if you still have a question of how do you live your life, then you haven't yet reached the epitome of life, and more practice is needed, and it will become clearer, and the spiritual journey continues. Asen says, very insightful. Thank you. Brian says, hi, Artem. Hi, Brian. To love myself, I basically just had yes. That's the trick. And it is the hardest thing. It is the hardest thing because we all harbor lots of self-denial, lots of self-judgment, lots of self-hatred, and we project it to everybody else. And that's the way everybody else is, actually. And we are born into this world. We are born into this profoundly sick society. And we learn its ways, and it enforces its ways on us through suppression, violence, humiliation, judgment. And we are too little to even realize what's going on. So yes, and then the road back begins to a natural state, to a nascent state, to the state in which we were born. And this road is always about self-acceptance, and is always about loving that character that has formed in order to protect you from your pain. But it can only be accepted through witnessing and being compassionate for his pain or hers. So yes, self-acceptance is the road, and it is very difficult to do that. But it is the most beautiful thing when it starts to authentically happen to you. And that is the source of love and acceptance to other people, never the other way around, right? So there is some value in practice when you practice intimacy with other people, when you learn to be intimate and non-judgmental and accepting other people's experience. But the practice fundamentally still takes you back to self-acceptance, because to truly understand another person, to truly understand him, is actually to say, now I see. If I were in your shoes, I would do the same thing. You see? So fundamentally, it's always about, even as you speak to somebody else, you see, it's always about learning something about yourself. You see? Okay. So MG says, how can time and space not exist? You're right, they do exist. It's actually, I mean, time and space does not exist is actually an illusion. It's a very persistent common illusion in non-duality. It's usually because you see the path from awakening to Buddhahood is very long, and the absolute vast majority of teachers get stuck in non-duality to never emerge on the other side and become a Tathagata. So they completely they are completely in the grip of delusion that this is enlightenment and time and space don't exist and blah 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 and all of this, right? No. What is true is that consciousness is perceived to be outside of time and space. So consciousness is perceived to be formless, non-localized, and outside of time and eternal, right? And this is a very valid experience. But ultimately, consciousness is also a percept of the mind, which is why in Buddhism, for example, right, they would two of the fetters of Buddhism, one of them is freedom from clinging to material existence, which is exactly like when people find consciousness. So this is like they say, well, okay, I'm not the body. That's what's supposed to be the material existence. So they say I'm consciousness, right? And consciousness is outside of time and space. So time and space don't exist. If consciousness is the true me, then time and space don't exist, right? But then they forget that the other fetter of Buddhism is freedom from clinging to immaterial existence, which is consciousness. So for as long as you still feel that you're consciousness or awareness or something immaterial, and you exist as something immaterial, then you're not yet free from clinging for material existence. And the journey continues, because the deeper truth is that this consciousness, this awareness, this immaterial me, the higher self, whatever it is, isn't actually the destination. It is the goal. Sorry, not the goal, but it is the tool. It is that into which the ego dissolves. It is that into which the falsehoods dissolve. It is a temporary identity that is needed for the ego to undergo its dissolution. That's actually not the destination, believe it or not. But most people think it is, because the journey is very long and it's very painful, and as such they only give advice to find consciousness, but they don't give any further advice, because so don't get too bogged down with philosophy of time and space don't exist. Is it an experience where you can live your life experientially, being convinced that time and space don't exist? Yes. Is it a valid experience? Yes. Have I gone through it also? Yes. For like over a year. I mean, most people go through it for a decade, and some never emerge from it. So in the completely light state, that's also an absurdity. I mean, why would I say to everybody time and space don't exist, while at the same time acting as if it is, as if it does? So it's hypocrisy, and it doesn't serve anybody, right? So you can philosophize. You can philosophize and say time and space are kind of don't exist. There is only now, and it's true. Yes, I mean you could say that both time and space are kind of dimensions of one big object, which is the universe, and your current experience here and now is just a point that is moving in this four-dimensional time-space object, and that is experience of life. And it would, and actually, you know what? And scientists would agree with you. So if you look at it this way, so spirituality and science don't actually contradict each other, and there are lots of like stages on the spiritual path where you don't only understand this intellectually, but also experience it, and it becomes your experiential reality. It doesn't mean that those statements have any value, because the only thing that has value is the shifts in your perception, the shifts in your well-being, the shifts in your truthfulness, and the shifts in your contentment and equanimity. That makes sense, and then you can make a philosophy out of it if you wish. But philosophy is never primary. You see, that's also to be understood. The journey is experiential. The journey is existential. Okay, so I hope that this answers the question to some extent. And why Frog says, how do you dissolve the last bit of the dream when there is barely any suffering left? If you can't see anything that you haven't accepted yet. Yeah, so that is very difficult. And that is why there are so few Buddhists. Because you are exactly correct. At some point, it gets very difficult to get to kind of the remaining suffering, or it takes, because meditation at some point ceases to be an effective practice. So at some point you are just kind of, meditation is just sitting there and it doesn't feel productive. So for as long as something arises in meditation in you, for as long as some experience, bodily sensation, kundalini, emotional response, restlessness, for as long as something arises in you in a meditation, like when you meditate for 2 hours, for example, and there's some discomfort, it is good practice, and your conditioning is not really hidden very deep. So then I would continue. Then I would advise that. Then there could still some unfolding of conditioning happening in dreams. That for as long as you're dreaming, that's also true. And in general, there's of course a point after which just, as Osho used to say, just relaxation is necessary. So just relax, kind of. You relax and things happen. They tend to happen. You cannot force them. But with regards to practice, still, the same Osho, right, spent another 3 years in silence because he felt that something was incomplete. So he was a very well-known teacher by the time, and he was blissful and equanimous and extremely happy, but still he felt that something was incomplete, and he spent another 3 years in silence, which is a testament of how difficult it can be to dissolve the last shreds of conditioning, right? So I recommend responsible use of psychedelics in combination with meditation for the same purpose. And I also remind people that you don't have to dissolve, if you because it's all about well-being. You're done when you say you're done. If you're happy, if you just want to live your life, because in the end it's about living life, right? It's not about dwelling in some kind of bodiless state and stuff. That is still on the way. So because you have to transcend, and then you have to transcend the transcendence. So not fall back, but go through, so that transcendence isn't possible any longer. Because after you transcend the transcendence, you cannot go back into the state of like dwelling in a bodiless abode. There's no way, because it was seen as a delusion. So you cannot go back to delusion. So kind of you don't have to go all the way, but or make it a goal. It's even a contradictory goal, because even meditation and psychedelics, they don't do anything to you. They sort of just they kind of they allow more acceptance and more surrender to happen. But still it happens despite of you, right? So So yeah, so if you feel like for you like there's much more for you to go, or there's something, right? So and then I would say meditate. If you feel like meditation doesn't do anything, then I would say either just relax already, or you can try psychedelics. I don't think that in the modern day and age, I you should spend 3 years in silence. But if you're a real maniac, then you can do that as well. Up to you. Okay. So Brian says, why do we have to experience non-duality to realize the absolute truth? It doesn't really make any sense. Maybe because it would be too hard for the brain to accept it. Yeah, kinda. You see, you don't have to, strictly speaking, right? So the degree of conditioning that is left, strictly speaking, isn't proportional to where your identity lies. Which is why I never fail to repeat that there are old people who are much chiller, much wiser, much more compassionate than the vast amount of young idiots that are screaming around, that are running around screaming, "I am awareness," while being callous and intolerant and deceitful and all of this stuff. But apparently, our minds have this mechanism of reversing itself in a natural state. And when this mechanism begins to act, then your identity shifts to something outside of what appears to be outside of you. So it appears to be outside of the body too. So and that, and you would be right? So that is needed so that the suffering can be witnessed from that place. So you don't have to go through it, but experientially that almost always happens, and I've never actually seen a case where it didn't happen, because sort of experientially in enlightenment, ego dies, right? So it has to die into something. Something has to be perceived as something that cannot die, so that ego can, right? So you are not the ego, but then what are you, right? So if the ego is dying in the spiritual process, then there must be some identity that is perceived to be unborn, and of course, I mean, this is also an illusion, but in a way it can be said to be a necessary one. So my advice would be not to think too much of those things, right? But to just practice, live life, practice being free, going for what you want, living life fully, living life wholeheartedly, living life intensely, and learning to accept yourself, learning to love yourself, learning greater intimacy with yourself, greater intimacy with other people. And those shifts in perception and identity that can be called, non-dual states and some other, non-doership, whatever, they arise and fall on the way, and it's okay. It's all part of experience. It's all part of the ride. So you don't even really have to have an explanatory framework for that. But if mine was helpful to you, then wonderful. Okay. Manoj says, how do I stop prioritizing somebody else's pain more than my own because I feel theirs is more than mine? Well, first of all, you cannot feel theirs is more than mine. You think theirs is more than yours, right? And what you're saying is basically when somebody tells you their struggle, you think that their struggle is greater. And even though you are also struggling, you do things for them instead of for you. So that is how I understood your question. And if I misunderstood you, please feel free to correct me in comments as I will start to address it. So there are a couple of two ways that I can think. So one way is to realize that by doing that, you're betraying yourself, and you can't actually help anybody if you aren't coming from a loving place instead of from a place of hurt. If you can't help anybody, if you aren't doing it joyfully and lovingly, but you're doing it out of the sense of the obligation. So you can be very truthful to yourself about it, and it will be difficult, and then you will have to be more true to yourself and learn to live your life for you and not out of a sense of obligation. Another way to look into it is that you have to you will admit to yourself then actually you enjoy it, and your struggle is your hypocrisy. So you actually like it, you like helping other people, and you just like whining about it, so and it is to some extent also true, because if you didn't like kind of being this martyr like person, then you wouldn't do it, right? So notice that both of those kind of lead to greater acceptance of yourself, one way or the other, because because ultimately you have to realize that you're free in what you do. So if you do that with other people, then that's what you do. That's what you want. That's what you want to do. Maybe you're yearning for validation. Maybe you're yearning for them to say thank you. Maybe you want to be needed. Maybe not. Maybe it's authentic and compassionate. But whatever it is, if you're doing it, you want to. You see, so kind of take responsibility for what you do, and accept all of the inner experience. So that's the best. And practice, of course. Things tend to get clear with practice, as a lot of people on my forum would attest to. Neda says hi Neda. MG says thanks, you're welcome. Asen says, do people pursue enlightenment because they suffer, because they're curious? I think people, I don't know, but I think people pursue enlightenment because they suffer. I mean, you see, the enlightenment is a very interesting thing, is that for whatever reason you think you pursue it, it's gonna tell you that it was all a big lie. And it's going to be extremely disappointed. Like, for example, I believe, I'm not sure, but I believe that from what I remember, that Adi pursued enlightenment because he wanted to be a teacher, and he wanted to tell people, to help people, and he was interested in spiritual practice. And of course, when it really started happening to him, he was in for a big disappointment, you see. Later he started saying, well, sometimes the best teachers are those who don't want to teach, and things like that, because it is not really about what you think it will be about. Like all of the things that you think you pursue enlightenment for are usually, until you're enlightenment, are usually vain, egoic reasons, and sort of. So when it's the same thing as even happiness, right? So ego looks for happiness, and it pursues enlightenment in its quest for happiness. But the only happiness that is available to you, and it is if the ego disappears. So enlightenment is always a suicidal pursuit for the ego, right? So and in a way, yes. So people pursue enlightenment because they suffer. Yes. So the suffering takes people on the spiritual path, but the spiritual path itself is actually a path of greater acceptance of suffering. So there's a paradox right there, right? So whatever reason you pursue enlightenment, don't pay it much attention. You can think of, okay, there's some pool in me, and I feel driven by it. You can call it whatever you like, but whatever reason that you think you pursue enlightenment are going to be invalidated, I'm sure. Ramadeep says, oh, remember Ramadeep. Hi, Ramadeep. He says, Brian says, what is your view on Teal Swan's suicide reset button? Fucking ignorant, imbecile girl. Extremely dangerous, horribly delusional. She's nowhere near authentic realization. It's very unfortunate that people are listening to her. And more than that, my best friend who committed suicide listened to her and read her books, and I don't know if he subscribed to that notion. It's an absolutely delusional notion. This is not true. It's a view from the ego. Only ego can say that, because because ego does reincarnate, right? But enlightenment, ego dies, but ego is an illusion. So it is the same delusion that if you commit suicide, you will end all your suffering. So my view on the suicide, I was extremely direct and extremely strict in my views on suicide. There's a bunch of answers on Quora. One of them is, what is the biggest mistake ego can possibly make, and another is, what is Vedantic position on suicide? So in both of these answers, I speak, my position is that suicide is the biggest spiritual mistake that you can possibly make. It's never an exit. It's not a reset button. And if anything happens when you commit suicide, spiritually speaking, is like, what people, you will, like, the best thing you can happen is you will still experience all your suffering, but then you won't live freely. So, but there is I don't think that there's a way to avoid reevaluation of life, and that is also why people tend to report near-death experiences, or the whole life, a bunch of experiences. So I don't know what kind of experience starts to happen when brain starts to slowly die, but I wouldn't be surprised if the whole shebang starts to happen. Especially because like you can take LSD, for example, and the 5 minutes can subjectively last hours, oftentimes, and there's some scientific evidence that the brain maintains activity for like up to 8 or 15, I don't know, minutes after clinical death, if we define clinical death as the stopping of the heart, right? So if there is some activity in the brain after that, is there experience there? Possibly. How long does it subjectively last? I don't even want to think about it. Maybe it will last subjectively for as long as you will finally let go, which means that you will still go through all the suffering. So please, never, under no circumstances, commit suicide. There is no emotional pain that your body cannot take. Period. It's an illusion. There is no emotional pain that your body cannot take. So never commit suicide, my friends. If the going gets hard, gets tough, persevere. When you're sleepy, sleep. When you're hungry, eat. Your will to life is actually much greater than you can imagine right now if you're thinking about suicide. So that's not necessarily to you, Brian. So I'm just responding to everybody. Okay, so Non-White Frog says, Alex, I see you. I will bring you up soon. NY Frog says, you said that to get to the end, you have to set the intention to truth. Yes. But isn't truth always instrumental to ease suffering and increase well-being? No. Truth is fundamental. We suffer because we lie. Right? So we suffer because we lie, and dropping out falsehoods is painful. Like when if to realize that you have been living a lie, or to realize that you have believed in something that doesn't exist, and to drop it is painful. It's like there is no Santa Claus kind of pain. No kid likes to be told that. So just an example. It doesn't mean it's the same degree, but the degree of pain and enlightenment is much greater than the Santa Claus. But it's just an example. So truth, living truthfully, not lying to yourself, is a natural state. It's a natural state, and it's a state devoid of suffering. It's not devoid of physical pain, but it is devoid of suffering. So truth is not instrumental to ease suffering. To say that is the same as to say that our natural state is instrumental to ease the unnatural state. No, our natural state is always natural. So you know truth, you know it. It's just that on top, just as much as I do. Like, there's absolutely no difference between you and me. That's the only reason that I can even teach, right? Because you know everything that I know. I don't know anything that you know. No, it's just that on top of that, there are lies. On top of that, there are falsehoods, right? And then you say, so even the desire for truth will fall in the end. Well, I mean, of course, yes. If you know truth, then you don't need desire for truth, right? So the desire for, you could also say, the desire for happiness ends when you're happy. The desire for equanimity ends when you're equanimous. The desire for enlightenment ends when you enlighten. So the desire for truth ends when you live in truth. Well, of course, because you can only desire what you don't have. So you only desire truth because you forgot truth and got lost in the lies, right? So as you unravel the lies, truth reveals itself. And as you have very little lies, or no lies, or very little lies, so that you content and equanimous, then you cannot desire truth any longer. So you don't even desire truth because you have it. You desire to drop falsehoods. You desire to stop lying, and that leads you to truth and happiness. But it's a path. It's a road. Asen says, thanks, you're more than welcome. Quasi says, please explain romanticism as a way of life. Oh man, I don't know what you mean by romanticism as a way of life. I'm not familiar with this philosophy. I don't know what it is. The only context in which I personally use this word, from what I remember, is I warn people from the dangers of Enlightenment romanticism, where we get enamored by ancient teachings, Buddhism, Hinduism, and stuff like that, and we think that because it's ancient, it's like, I don't know, proven, cool, whatever. The reality is the opposite. Because it's ancient, it uses a very different language from yours. There's a 2,400 years between. Culturally super different, language was super different. You pretty much don't read them. You read some weird interpretation and some translation. Okay, but if you don't understand the culture from that time, you don't understand their language. So regardless of what literal translation is, so which is why I say it's much more important to listen to contemporaries. So listen to Osho, listen to Adya, listen to me. So there is a danger of that. That's the only context in which I use the word romanticism. So if you want to elaborate on that, then you would have to ask a more concrete question. Asen says, the fact that we lived a lie, does that count for anything? No, I mean, not really, because you're living a lie on top of truth. So your experience is also my experience. You see, that's why it doesn't matter if you get enlightened or not in this life, actually, because your experience is also my experience. It's just that on top of the experiencing life the same way that I do, you're experiencing life the same way that I did also before it was on top, which is the lies and dreaming, right? But you're not missing life by not being enlightened. It's not possible to miss your true nature. It's not possible to not have lived life. It's not possible because it is your true nature. It's just that on the level of consciousness, you're constantly disconnected from the ecstasy, which is life. That's what you're struggling with. Not that you aren't having the same wonderful experience that I am having. Brian says, is ayahuasca and combo dangerous? I don't know about combo. Do I think that ayahuasca is dangerous? No, not really. I mean, the only danger of ayahuasca would be the gastrointestinal, I don't know the word, tract. Ayahuasca basically metabolizes into DMT. So it's a kind of a long and not very intense DMT trip. So the only danger, of course, you don't want to use it with, you don't want to do it with SSRIs, kind of generally speaking, you don't want to do psychedelics with SSRIs. It's much better to wean off yourself of that. And of course, different combinations can be dangerous, especially things like MDMA, which isn't really a proper psychedelic. So things like that, because you can overdose on it, it can be dangerous. But ayahuasca and DMT is a proper psychedelic, and it's not really dangerous. I mean, there are some DMT strains that can be dangerous. Like, for example, 5-MeO DMT can be lethal. So with like dosage wise. So at least that's from what I remember. So be careful with that. And also DMT in very large doses can elevate blood pressure and increase heartbeat. So you want to be careful with that a little bit. But generally, like ayahuasca compared to smoked DMT is a very mild DMT trip, but it just lasts long, which is also the same reason why I consider LSD to be the most potent psychedelic for spiritual work, is because it lasts long, and while it lasts, the brain forms new connections. Like the scientists studied the brain on LSD. They say it's a hyperconnected brain resembling the brain of a child, which is kind of my brain all the time. It's a hyperconnected brain which is resembling the brain of an infant. I'm sure that if they studied my brain, it would be kind of like that. So when the brain spends more time in the state, which is much closer to the natural state, although the come up can be horrific, but when the brain spends time in the state, it tends to, some of those connections tends to stay even after the trip, and that's kind of the integration, and that's why psychedelics have long-term effects, and that's the same with ayahuasca, right? So it's kind of a DMT, but not a short, and that's why I don't consider smoking DMT to be a good spiritual practice, because like whew, that's it, in out, just an experience. So ayahuasca is a kind of a long, prolonged, mild DMT trip. So people make authentic realizations on ayahuasca. People quit drinking or quit self-harm or after ayahuasca trip. So there is a lot of beautiful reports, and the only danger is basically how your body takes it, right? So people report diarrhea and vomiting and all sorts of stuff. It's going to be really hard on your stomach in a way that LSD isn't. But some people do need this ritualistic environment, absolutely, and there's nothing wrong with having a ritual when you use psychedelics, because just like with meditation from the egoic perspective, it always feels like you are surrendering to something, some power that is higher than yourself, and you're sort of relinquishing control in a way. So there's nothing wrong with being ritualistic about it. And some people need it. Some people think that this vomiting and diarrhea is purging, which is fine. I mean, if they want to think this way, that's totally fine. Are there any dangers from that? I don't think so. I haven't really studied it, but I did ayahuasca a couple of times, so I know a couple of ayahuasqueros, I think they call it, and they actually drink every time that they drink with their clients. I don't know how to call it, and my understanding is that they don't have upset stomach or diarrhea any longer. So their body's adapted to it. I mean, is my understanding complete and objective? I don't know. So do your own research. My understanding is it's not dangerous, but of course, you have to know how to make it, right? So kind of don't, if you want to try it, my advice would be to go with people who are professionals, who do it for years, who other people did. And I would even advise to do it in the US, or if you're from US, like don't go to some Peru. Like, yes, it's all very, very romantic, but if that something happens, if you need help, then it's much more likely, and people who do this in the US, they are also they need to be much more responsible, and they usually are, because they know that if something really bad happens, that they will find themselves in a lot of legal trouble. So they are usually careful, and they know what they're doing, and if they're responsible, if they've been practicing it for years, it can be a wonderful experience. So yes, it can be not. They usually don't advertise themselves, of course, as much, because sometimes what they do is unfortunately kind of a gray area legally. So, but you can find them, and of course, I'm assuming that you are in the U.S., right? So if you are in another country, then maybe it's better to fly to Peru, or like where people fly to for those experiences. Asen says, do you understand that when suffering gets really, really bad, suicide may be compassionate to yourself? No, I don't understand this, and neither do you. This is a huge illusion. Suicide is never compassionate to yourself. Suicide is always an act of self-hatred. How can harming your body not be an act of self-hatred? What are you talking about? Suicide is a triumph of egoic insanity over sanctity of life. It's murder. Compassionate. Give me a fucking break. Okay. Hi, Alex.
Hey,
Why
Artem.
are you laughing?
I was just amused by your response
Oh,
to that question. Just how angry you get. Is
yeah,
funny
this
sometimes.
is a strange question.
Hi.
I like, stop hurting life, people. Like, to me, you are life. You know, when you, it doesn't matter to me if you kill yourself or you kill other people. You know, stop hurting life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, never allow your emotional pain to get you to the point where you start physically hurting life.
Yeah.
Life is sacred. All life is sacred. That's what you are. You just forgot it. You see, it's you can forget it in your pain. You can forget it in your uh, uh, yes, the pain is real. Yes, you tend to forget it, but it doesn't mean that it somehow becomes true just because you forgot it. You know.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for reminding me of that.
yeah, Alex, what did you wanna ask me something?
Yeah. So I had something else to ask you, but based on the last question about the ayahuasca, I was just curious. I noticed you said that LSD is in your experience the best and the most intense of or the longest lasting.
No, not, the most intense is hold on. The most intense doesn't mean the best. It's actually it might sometimes even be the opposite. So the most intense experience isn't necessarily the best experience. So don't look for the most intense experience. The best in my meaning means the most long-term effect, most long-term shifts, most
Right.
long-term insights. And actually, the contents of the trip, especially of the intense trip, actually aren't really relevant, because authentic insights
Right.
mostly come later during the integration stage, and they stay with you forever. But while the trip is usually just an experience. So that is what the best is in my experience. So what
Right.
happens later?
Right. So you said LSD is one of those because it happens longer and your brain makes those connections that sometimes stay with you even after the trip is over, right? And for the
That was Yes, that was
integration.
my experience, or at least my interpretation of my experience with LSD. Yes.
So I've been doing mushrooms. Is that? I mean,
The same thing,
is it
pretty
similar?
much. Yes,
Same
very
thing.
much. So it's just that mushrooms they last a little less. They
Little
have like somewhat like different sort of taste, so to speak. But generally speaking, it's the same thing. And if you're doing moderate doses of mushrooms that help you open up to your pain, open up, do the emotional release, you combine it with meditation, it lasts for, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours. It can be really good practice also. It's
Okay.
just my advice would be to do moderate doses and to combine it with meditation.
Yeah, I've been doing like 2.8 to 3 grams.
Okay, well, I'm not too experienced with mushrooms, but I think it's a kind of a standard dose, or a
It's
little
a moderate dose.
higher than that. But it's not a heroic dose, and I don't think it's needed.
Do you think you could even go higher than that? And it would be it'd
I mean,
be
you can go as high as you want. I mean,
right.
it's just going to be more intense and more painful. And I mean, of course there are limits, right? But kind of most kind of classical psychedelics, such as mushrooms and LSD, the ratio of overdose to effective dose is incredibly high. So you will not overdose
Right.
physically. You will not your body will not be in physical danger. Like it takes a very large dose so that if the body so that the body gets, like, I have a friend who is who considers himself a guide, and he guides people to ego death, temporary, of course, with mushrooms. So he isn't enlightened, but he has experienced this many times. My understanding is, and I think that they go as high as like 20 grams. So like completely insane doses. Yes, and people still, because physically it is quite safe. And he, of course, he knows his mushrooms, so he's a real pro. So if you want to ask about mushrooms, I can maybe introduce you to him. But
yeah, that'd be good.
But I don't have a lot of experience with mushrooms, so generally speaking, it is the same. So if I kind of at a certain point, if I took mushrooms versus LSD, there would be no difference, right? Even weed is the same. So generally speaking, there is no difference. So they could be just as good a tool.
Is it counterproductive to do larger doses? That's what I want to know.
Well, it can be, in a way that larger doses can fairly easily get you into somewhat delusional states when you're absolutely convinced that you're enlightened, and then you will start writing to me like, Artem, you're a piece of shit. I see you now. I see that you're a fake, and I'm a god, and I hate you, and like you're nothing. You haven't realized anything. I mean, yes. So there are like. It
but
is.
You need to go through that anyway, right? Or I mean,
yes, but with psychedelics, you sometimes it can get very intense and very and delusional. So kind of psychedelics, if you use them too much, if you have like too high a dose, right? Then it is somewhat easier. It can be somewhat harder for you to ground yourself back. Kind of, you see. So that's the only danger of the high dose. But generally speaking, you can go higher. Generally speaking. So I think I definitely took pretty high doses. I mean, one time I took like 500 milligrams of LSD.
Wow.
I think, or even maybe more. It was very, very difficult. It was very difficult, but it was not painful. It was not dangerous for me physically. Although I was convinced that it was. I was convinced that I'm dying, and I was begging for people to call 911. So
you were begging people to call 911.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it can be extremely difficult experience. So, and of course I wasn't. And of course, like, I was lucky that there were more experienced people around who said, it's okay. They kind of they measured my pulse and they said, it's totally fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So mentally, all of those things can be really, really difficult, but physically it's not dangerous. So, and also the integration will be more intense and will take longer, and you might get some weird ideas from the trip. Just remember that everything that happens on the trip is not consequential. That's just a dreaming mind. Whatever you see on the trip is just a dreaming mind. Reality is not that. Reality is what right in front of you. That's reality.
Usually when I take shrooms, I have that thought, like, remember, this is just dreaming minds.
But of course you will forget on the trip. Just remember afterwards when you come back from the trip.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That you never saw there anything profound. The profundity all happens here. The profundity is right here, right now, always.
But I thought you said before that when you take psychedelics, it's a glimpse into seeing
afterwards, after the crazy part. So it's like if you take LSD, and the same with mushrooms. Like, so you go through some difficult, like you can see some fear, hallucinations, like lots of craziness. Like you can go into this void, whatever. There are all a bunch of things that can happen to you, but sooner or later you get to what I call the plateau stage of the trip. And the plateau stage of the trip is usually, I don't know if you can confirm it with your mushroom experience, but usually the plateau stage of the trip is that when all of these things kind of subside, and you found yourself in kind of the same reality. So there's not a lot of visual distortions, but everything is beautiful. And the mind is quieter. You feel free. There's not a lot of emotion. It's just kind of nice. That is the glimpse.
Okay.
And that is just a sort of that is a kind of a bonus, nothing else. That's not the point. The
Right.
real work was coming towards this, right? Because so you have been exposed to the layers of insanity and suffering that separate you from this, your current you, from the state that you have just experienced for like 2 or 3 hours of the plateau stage, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is the glimpse.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
Yes. No. Thank you. That I actually didn't even know that. That makes a lot of sense. Is it? I've had blissful trips. I've done 3. I've only done 3 trips, but they've all been blissful over the course of the past 2.5 months. I mean, is it guaranteed to get harder and more intense harder and more painful when I take a larger dose? Or could I just keep having really great blissful?
I don't know. I can't tell you. But what I do know is that if there's still fear in you, if there's still anxiety in you, if there's still restlessness and meditation, right?
It'll
Then
come out.
sooner or later, like maybe you having a lot of blissful trips right now, you have, like, maybe you have been separated from your natural bliss for such a long time that's exactly what you need right now. But sooner or later, when you are done with that, there will be more work. So psychedelics are kind of unpredictable in this way, right? So
Okay. Yeah.
bliss is also something that you can cling to, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of tends to
Yeah.
show what's next for you, right? So right now, maybe you will be drenched in bliss for some time, and that's fine. Enjoy it. You see.
Yes.
But I think so, right? I think that sooner or later it will hit some other points, but don't try to predict your experience. Don't go with predict. Yes.
Yeah. Bliss can also be painful, right?
Oh,
Like,
yes,
overwhelming.
absolutely. Yes, it can
I've
be
had that.
so much that
Yes.
it's uncomfortable. It can be so much pleasure that
Yes.
you're like, oh my God, please
Yes.
make it stop. Yes.
It's so weird. I've never
Definitely.
had it before.
Yes.
It happened last week for the
Yes,
first time.
yes. Which is also a testament that enlightenment actually not a state of constant bliss, right?
Yes. I
Yeah.
noticed
So you,
that.
it's
Like,
it's
I
it's
don't
all
want
it's
this all the
another
time.
part of misery. It's
Yes.
the opposite part of misery. Bliss is the opposite. Is the other side of misery.
Yeah, it was like I could see the illusion in it. It was like, whoa, this isn't all what I thought it would be. You know, there's pain to it as well.
Yeah, so there's pain, there's bliss. Both are good. Both are to be enjoyed. Both are wonderful.
Yeah. My last question to you was just that. So, my teacher has told me that I'm self-realized. She's told me that, like, in her view, it looks like I have abiding awareness, I have self-realization, but it doesn't feel like that to me. So I was wondering if you could just tell me, and I know, like, in objective truth, it actually doesn't matter because the process is still the same, just allowing your internal experience.
Yes.
But I would just like to know, are there any key factors that I can know for myself to determine if I am?
I can tell you how I use this term, but
Yeah.
it doesn't matter, right? So it doesn't matter. Here's how I use this term. So some people like describe their state, for example, stillness, observing imperfect personality. And those people would say usually that personality is important. You cannot be without personality. Like, how can you be without ego? You cannot survive without ego. So that's our state. That's enlightenment, is when you are stillness, consciousness, awareness, which is observing ego. And ego is needed. Ego is a part of it. Ego is a part of the human experience. That's enlightenment. So those people, I do not consider self-realized. This is what I would consider kind of awakening, where a sort of a foundational stillness, foundational equanimity. I muted you, by the way, because there's a lot of noise from your microphone. So some kind of a foundational awareness, some kind of foundational stillness is found, and it is witnessing the personality, and it is considered that, I don't know, like personality is just the other side of that, and both are needed. So so self-realization in my language is when it is clearly seen that all of your personality is false, and you don't, and your identity usually jumps to awareness, and you feel that only consciousness, only awareness is true, and everything else in your experience, like your personality, is not true. That's also premature, because not everything else in your experience is not true. But we get so used to be spinning in personality that it is so central to our experience in the dream states, so that when it happens, it feels like everything is not true. The only thing that is true is the observer. So that is usually how abiding awareness feels like, and that is there's a very different experience from stillness observing an imperfect personality, because stillness observing imperfect personality is a shift of perception. Self-realization, when you kind of say, okay, only awareness is true, everything else is a dream, feels like death. So, but that even is sort of is just the beginning of, well, not the beginning, but even that state is fundamentally just so that the rest of the personality would dissolve into awareness. Because if you really had no personality, so it's in a way also a delusional state, because if you really had no personality, you would also not perceive yourself as awareness. There would be no need. You would just be a normal dude going around doing what you want in freedom. That's how I use this term. Now the question is, do most people go through this very easily identifiable stages? And I think no. Like people whose awakening tends to be very rupturous and deep and intense and dramatic, like Osho, like mine, like Edgeworth, they tend to kind of jump into this abiding awareness, never to return into identifying with personality, or even, seeing it kind of, but there's still a lot of suffering, but they're usually, it never occurs to them that, oh no, the personality is needed. No. I mean, when you realize that it's not needed and it's all going to be dissolved, that's what I consider self-realization. But it really, but you also have to understand that your desire to place yourself into some location of the path is also something that occupies your mind instead of letting you sink deeper into the now. So it's also unproductive. So only ego tries to evaluate its position on the path. So you also have to realize that. So I'm unmuting you now.
Yeah, okay. I've noticed that I mean, really, it is only my ego that wants that certainty.
Yes.
Because
yes.
And then it would find something else to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Uncertain.
So focus on experience, and it doesn't really matter. Kind of sooner you will understand everything that I'm saying sooner or later. It's just a matter of time.
So the part that I did relate to is that, like, as I'm talking to you now, and it happens a lot when I'm talking with people, I can literally see the false, like, mechanisms within my personality, like, oh, he's trying to he's trying to act like his student, or he's trying to make sure that he doesn't think he's bullshit, or he's trying to, like, make sure that he has enough time to talk.
Yes.
Like,
how do I look like? How do I look like from outside? Yes. Yeah. So generally, like, after my self-realization, I didn't give a shit. Like I did, but there was still suffering. But the sort of kind of so most of my suffering after my self-realization was, kind of the dissolution of the enlightened ego, which is the dissolution of the compassion towards people, which was also my own pain, anger for the state of the world, which was also my own pain, the yearning to teach, which was also my own pain. So things like that. But on a personal level, right, kind of, what would people think of me? That was pretty much gone. But the dissolution of the enlightened ego, the teacher's ego, is actually a much longer process, and that's a difference between Bodhisattva and the Buddha, and that's also a big difference. But it all boils down to suffering, to your own personal suffering, ultimately. So Yeah, you need to do something about your microphone because it constantly pops. Well, you can watch the video later on YouTube and you will hear it.
Yeah, no, I hear it now. I'm not moving my phone in a weird way or anything.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Yeah, maybe it's it's hard to say. I don't know. Anyway, would you mind? I have if you don't have any more questions, I have a bunch of comments from Brian and Asen, and then I will wrap it up.
Yeah. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you, Alex, and good luck to you. It was nice. You look nice today. You probably yeah.
I got a haircut.
Not as struggling as before, which is
Yeah.
nice, which is wonderful. Okay,
Yeah. Thank you.
bye.
Bye.
So Brian says a statistic from the National Council on Aging says that those 85 years and older have the highest suicide rate by age group. Why is this happening? Yeah, so this is happening, I think, because it is vitally important for the ego to be seen and accepted, and this usually happens through career, and especially in older people through family ties. So if you are very old and you find yourself alone, right? So for example, if your spouse is dead, if you don't have any children or your children aren't very close to you, then there's like, and the death is close, then a huge meaninglessness of life starts to dawn on you. It can become very, very difficult, right? And of course, there could arise a temptation to kind of finish your life prematurely. So it does, like, all suicide is always a movement of an ego, always. So every life is infinitely in love with itself. So suicide is an absurdity. So suicide is only not absurd if it is to avoid physical pain, but the emotional pain, all emotional pain is egoic pain. It is the pain of absurdity. It is the pain of hypocrisy. It is the pain of pretense. So so all suicide fundamentally is a movement of ego, and kind of, it does make some sense that but old people are left alone, and I think this especially applies to men from what I believe. So because women are usually much more socially connected. Asen says, you said don't hurt life, but what about eating meat? I mean, I almost don't eat meat. I eat it very rarely. But yeah, I mean, the thing is that there's, it's not that like there's like some sort of a rule, don't hurt life. You see, because life hurts life. Life eats life. Even you as life, you eat other life. And if you're a predator, then you eat life, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's like there's nothing egoic about that. That's natural. But as a animal, as a natural animal, it's actually you actually we aren't supposed to eat as much meat. You see, most of our diet is vegetarian life, not vegetative life. Most of our diet, just like most of apes and monkeys, most. So we hurt life not because it is natural for us. Almost universally, we hurt life in pain, in egoic vanity, out of pride, out of some ideas, out of some. Out of superiority, out of vanity, so to prove something to somebody, right? Animals hurt life to survive. Animals hurt life. If you're a predator, then hurting life is your diet. So it's the most natural thing in the world, right? But for us, it's not natural, right? So when I say don't hurt life, I mean, basically what I'm saying is that restrain your very unnatural impulse until you see through it, and until your spiritual practice takes you to the core of it, and you're able to ultimately dissolve it. But until that time, it is very unnatural impulse. You see, and I had a lot of impulses throughout my life, right? I was like, for example, for years, I had these moments from time to time, not very frequently, but from time to time, when I'd be sitting at the intersection and like, I think, oh, like, and like, you know, in a car, and like, what if I press the gas pedal to the floor right now? And of course, I never did this, but I was always wondering, where is this coming from? You see, just out of the blue. So it's a very, of course, I don't have anything even remotely like that right now. It was a very unnatural impulse, and though impulses to hurt life mostly come from ego. What about killing someone who's invading your country? Well, I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, then it's a matter of nationalism. I mean, I personally don't view people in my country to be any other people than people from other country, right? So if I take this stance already, then why should I kill those people? Tell me, because they invaders. Well, I mean, sure, right, but the soldiers aren't invaders. They're just brainwashed. They're just people who got those ideas from other people and believed them that their invasion had anything to do with their national pride or my freedom or things like that, right? Why should I kill them? You see, it is very easy to try to justify hatred and violence, and we all live in such a delusional culture of pride and virtue, and most of our virtues are actually violent. That we think that defending our country by killing this innocent young boys who don't know any better is somehow a virtuous thing to do. So yes, I mean, of course, right? If this is self-defense, right? Then if you don't have any other option, then sure, right? But be careful. You know how much of your action is driven by ignorance, and how much of your action is driven by rationality and survival. Brian says, can we know for sure what happens after death, or that it doesn't happen? Well, no. Also, Brian says, it's possible for an enlightened being to commit suicide. No, it's not. It's absolutely not possible for me to commit suicide. So the only reason I would be tempted to commit suicide if I'm like 90-year-old, I'm in a huge amount of pain, and I can only live on like opioids and stuff, and it's time for me to go, and then I would gladly, right? But there's absolutely no circumstance. If my body is okay, if I have enough food, like there's absolutely no emotional circumstance. There's absolutely nothing that can happen outside so that I would commit suicide, just because I don't generally experience any emotional pain, and I find every moment of life very enjoyable and blissful. So why would I commit suicide? That's a natural state. Animals don't commit suicide, and there's a reason for it. We people are quite insane in our vanity and in the society that we have created, which is extremely judgmental society based on comparisons. So that leads to all sorts of misery and malice, not nature. Okay, it's been an hour and a half. I'm a little tired, guys. I'm a little tired. I want to take a nap. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for these wonderful questions. I had a lot of questions today, lots of good questions. Please, people who are asking questions, don't be shy to join in real life. If you don't want to, it's fine. No worries. I will still address it. Jesus, a sensei, but emotional pain is worse than physical. No, it's not. It's an illusion. You think it is. That's exactly the spiritual process, to kind of see that the fact that you think that emotional pain is so bad is an illusion. You think so precisely because you're scared of it. If you start approaching it, and if you start feeling it, it will get worse, right? But sooner or later, you will see that it's not as bad as you think it is. You see, that's exactly the illusion. So, okay, that's it. No more questions. Okay. Bye, guys. Thank you very much for participation. I will see you next week. Feel free to join my Discord server. I think some people here are on it, so I can they can invite you there. Feel free to follow me on Facebook and on other platforms. So thank you very much, Asen. I will please, by the way, come come to Discord. Maybe some some other people could help you also, and keep practicing. Okay, thank you guys. All the best to you. I hope it was valuable to you. I hope it was helpful to you. So bye. Best of luck. Love you all very much. Bye, guys. Bye.